When you go to bed on Christmas Eve, you expect to wake up with your family in the living room laughing, opening Christmas gifts, and just having a great time. In 1945, in the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, the Sodder family did the same. But before the sun could rise, their home was engulfed in flames, and 5 of their children vanished. No bodies, no remains, no answers. What began as a tragedy soon became one of America's most haunting mysteries. Was it an accident or something far darker? Tonight, we uncover the case of the Sodder family, the Christmas Eve fire that still defies explanation 80 years later. It was just past 10:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve. George and Jenny Sodder were finally heading to bed after a long day of celebration. 9 of their 10 children were home that night. The second oldest, Joe, was away serving in the army. The house was warm, still carrying the hum of laughter and the faint glow of Christmas lights. Some of the children stayed up a bit longer, playing, finishing up chores, and simply soaking in the magic of the night. A few hours later, around 12:30 a.m., Jenny was jolted awake by the ringing of the telephone. She answered, still heavy with sleep. Over the phone came cruel and mocking laughter, sharp and cold. A woman's voice asked for someone Jenny didn't know, a name that did not belong in her home. Jenny just told her she had the wrong number and then hung up, but something about that call didn't feel right. As she moved through the silent house, her unease grew. The lights were still on, the curtains wide open, and the front door was unlocked. It wasn't like her children to leave things this way. They knew better. Still, Jenny assumed it was the excitement of Christmas, that in their hurry to get to bed, they'd simply forgotten. Her eldest daughter, Marion, had fallen asleep on the couch. The others were presumably tucked in their beds upstairs. Jenny quietly closed the curtains and locked the door before returning to bed. But as she began to drift off, she heard a sudden heavy thud on the roof, like a weight dropping from above, followed by a rolling sound and then silence. Convincing herself it was just an animal, Jenny went back to sleep. But moments later, she would wake up in that home for the last time. Jenny awoke to the thick, burning scent of smoke and screamed for George. He bolted upright, and together they grabbed their youngest, 3-year-old Sylvia, who had been sleeping with them, and raced towards the children's rooms. But the staircase was already engulfed in flames. 2 of the older boys, John and George Jr., fought their way through the fire and told their parents that the heat and the smoke had prevented them from reaching their siblings' room. In the chaos, Sylvia, the 2 boys, and their eldest daughter, who had been sleeping downstairs, escaped the fire. That left George, Jenny, and 4 of their children safe outside. But 5 of their children were still trapped upstairs. George tried everything. The ladder that had always leaned against the house, well, it was gone. Both of his trucks, which had worked just the day before, would not start, and the phone line, which had just worked an hour ago, was dead. They stood in the freezing night, helpless, watching, as their home and their lives were swallowed by the fire. The heat seared their faces, smoke stung their eyes, every snap of timber sounded like a scream. The volunteer fire department, located just 2.5 miles away, wouldn't arrive until 7 hours later. By sunrise, the Sodder home was gone, and somewhere in that ruin, 5 of their children were lost. Smoke still curled from the charred walls, and the morning air was heavy with ash. When the ruins cooled, investigators expected to find some kind of remains, bones, teeth, something. But there was nothing. Not a single trace. Authorities blamed faulty wiring. But that didn't make sense. The lights were still on when some of the family was trying to escape the fire. Experts later explained, a 45-minute fire could never reach the heat needed to cremate 5 human bodies. One crematorium worker even told George, even after 2 hours at 2,000 degrees, bones still remain. But not here. The absence of any trace only deepened the horror. 5 children simply vanished into smoke and silence. So, what really happened to the Sodder children? In the days that followed, the mystery only deepened. A passing driver claimed he saw people throwing balls of fire towards the Sodder house that night. A woman at a nearby motel says she saw 5 children the next morning, with 2 men and 2 women of Italian descent. Another woman swore she saw them a week later in Charleston, and then came the evidence. The phone line? Cut, not burned. The ladder? Found 75 feet away, tossed into a ravine. George's trucks? Working fine the next day. He began to believe that someone had tampered with them that night. Weeks later, when the Sodders returned to the site themselves, little Sylvia found something strange in the grass. A small green rubber casing. John, just home from the war, recognized it immediately. It looked like the kind used for incendiary grenades. Jenny remembered the heavy thud that she had heard on the roof that night, and suddenly it made chilling sense. It also supported what the Sodders had believed all along, that the fire had started upstairs where the children slept, not from faulty wiring below. George also couldn't shake a memory. Months before the fire, a man, an insurance salesman, had come to the house trying to sell him a policy. When George refused, the man grew furious. He accused George of speaking out too harshly against Mussolini, words that had already made George enemies in the Italian community of his town. Before leaving, the man warned him, "Your house will go up in smoke, and your children will be destroyed." Now at the time, George took it as an empty threat. But after the fire, the words echoed differently. And when the coroner's inquest declared the fire an accident, George was stunned to see that same insurance salesman sitting on the jury. But even with the mounting evidence of arson, the authorities refused to investigate further. The case remained officially ruled an accident, caused by faulty wiring. To George and Jenny, the verdict was a lie. This wasn't carelessness. This was deliberate, and someone wanted the truth to stay buried. The Sodders never gave up. They hired private investigators. They begged for the FBI for help. And when the Bureau did offer, the local police refused to allow it. They even dug up the fire site years later. They actually found human vertebrae fragments, but they belonged to someone older than any of their children, and the bones were untouched by fire. In 1950, a massive billboard went up near their home. It offered $5,000, and then later it doubled to a $10,000 reward for any information about their missing children. It stayed there for nearly 40 years, a mother and father's eternal plea for answers. Then, in 1968, Jenny received a letter from Kentucky. Inside was a photo of a man appearing to be in his 20s. On the back, a handwritten note read, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie. Little boys, A90132 or 35. The man looked exactly like an older Louis, one of the missing children. The Sodders hired a private investigator to track the lead. After receiving his payment, though, he vanished and was never seen again. George and Jenny Sodder died without ever finding their children. No remains were ever found, and the man in the photo was never identified. 80 years later, and the fire still burns in America's memory, a mystery with no end. So, let me know in the comments below what you think happened to the Sodder children. If you liked the video and want to see more stories about mysteries, oddities, and weirdities, go ahead and toss me a like and a subscribe, por favor. Also, I'm new at this, so let me know if there's any way I can make these videos better. Merry Christmas, and good night.